Morning everyone, and thanks for joining us today for our business webinar. My name's Wayne Dutton and I'm part of the enterprise team and the business hub here at South Staffordshire Council. Our session today will be led by our Environmental Health Officer Graham Colling, who will provide practical advice and guidance to support businesses in those sectors that will be reopening on the 17th of May. We're also joined today by Councillor Brian Edwards, leader of the council, and we're also joined by other colleagues from our environmental health team who will be on hand to answer any questions you may have. So feel free to ask a question using the Q&A facility, and we will endeavour to answer those questions today. And if we can't answer them today, we will take them away and get back to you. Now I'll hand over to Graham to begin the session.
Thank you very much, Wayne. Again, yes, hello, my name's Graham Colling. I've worked at South Staffordshire for about 30 years now, so know the area reasonably well. What we're going to talk to you today is about the reopening of indoor spaces, and the slide shows that it's no earlier than the 17th of May. I think we have reasonable confidence that it is going to be the 17th of May, given the current situation with infection rates and cases. We want businesses to reopen safely. It's important to you and to us. And more than anything else, we don't want to see any further lockdowns. It would be a kick in the teeth after the sacrifices we've all made in the last year. We have heard from scientists that they expect further spikes in the infection rate later this year. What we hope is that by following the guidance and making the effort now, we can minimise the impact of any future spread of the virus. So what's in the webinar? We'll review where we are now. We'll highlight the changes that will take place in step 3. We'll talk about common priorities for businesses. We'll focus on the important actions for indoor spaces, discuss entertainment, and then we'll have a wrap up, and deal with any questions. So, as I say, where are we now? Cautious progress is probably the best description we can give. Steps 1 and 2 of the roadmap have gone well, and that's in no small part because of the public and how careful they've been, and businesses as well. The vaccination programme is going well. We've seen a break in the infection cycle, so infection rates are relatively low and certainly at levels that we haven't seen since September of last year. We still know that the virus is out there, and we also know that there are at least 1 in 3 of the people with the infection don't show any symptoms. So the testing that is being rolled out and the rapid testing that's on offer to anybody is really important at this stage, so that we can identify those people that are still spreading the virus. During steps 1 and steps 2, the infection rates have only risen slightly during that time. So we're confident that things can go forward into step 3, but we still need to be vigilant in the coming weeks. Just to give you a bit of a feel for how infection rates in South Staffordshire have gone since June last year, you can see that we were bumping along during the summer, during Eat Out to Help Out. Then you can see the infection rates start to rise as the autumn comes on and schools going back. First lockdown, or the second lockdown, took place and we managed to bring levels back down, but not down to the pre-existing levels. And then of course we had the situation in January to March this year with the infection rates peaking out. But if we look at the 7-day infection rates in March and April, these are the periods during which we had step 1 and step 2 take place. You can see that we had a slight rise after the schools went back in the middle of March, but very little indication of any problems as step 2 took place. And although there is a slight upward trend in infection rates, it isn't really anything that we have got any concerns about at this stage. So what's different this time round? Certainly scientists have a much better understanding of the virus and its variants. What we do know is that the more recent variants, such as the London Southeast variant, is much more transmissible. And this is particularly relevant to indoor spaces. Guidance has changed to reflect our experience of previous lockdowns and the situation with the virus. And so we need to be aware that things are different from when you were open last. Certainly, our experience has been in the investigation of outbreaks that for indoor settings where people spend time together in relatively close contact, that the virus can transmit much more easily. So it's really important that you follow the guidance and make sure that you control the situation. We've got a situation now where more than half the population has had at least one dose of the vaccine. And so we're in a much better position now than we've been in the past. But crucially, and we do say this, we still need to be vigilant to prevent transmission. So, step 3, the following can reopen. So we know about indoor hospitality, entertainment and attractions, organised indoor and adult sport, and that includes group exercises, which I know my wife will be particularly happy about. Most significant life events can take place with a maximum of 30 people. And there's been some recent government coverage about removing the limitation for funerals. That is only for the funeral service itself, not for any subsequent wake or commemoration. Even then, social distancing must be kept. So remaining accommodation, hotels, hostels and bed and breakfast can open. Some large events can start to take place. We can start to have outdoor entertainment taking place, and other large events will also be allowed. More detail will come later in the presentation. Sorry, we need to go back. It's jumped. Right. For social distancing, we have a new limit of 30 people who can congregate together outdoors. Just think about that in terms of hospitality, how you would actually deal with a situation like that. It's likely you might retain the rule of 6 or 2 households because you'll still be in the main having people seated in your establishments. But we still need social distancing to be taken into account. And for outdoor gatherings, you need to think about how you can practically achieve the limits as well as indoors. And it may be easy to still place a limit in your settings. So for your business, first things to think about. Remember what you're required to do when you could last open your business. Every business is unique and different. So, you know, you're in control of that, your business. You need to think about how you're going to do things. Just be imaginative and be creative. So on the common themes and priorities for everybody, the first thing and most importantly, we want you to go through and refresh your COVID-19 risk assessments if you've done them in the past. If not, you need to be looking at the new guidance or the updated guidance that is relevant to your type of setting. We'll ask you to go through and review all of your COVID control measures. Really importantly, we want you to kind of train and instruct staff, particularly if they've been on furlough for some time, to make sure that they know what the controls are that you want to put in place. Review your signage. Renew it where necessary, make sure it's clear. It's a really important way of making sure that your customers understand what you need them to do while they're in your establishment. We need to make sure that cleaning is done. It's still very important that surfaces are cleaned. And in indoor spaces, remind your customers to wear face coverings, and so signs are required to be displayed to that effect. And don't forget that despite all of the improvements, social distancing is still really important. Excuse my mouse, it seems to be having a life of its own at the moment. Continuing on, test and trace is still required and is really helping at the moment in dealing with infections and tracing anybody that's come into contact with people that have actually caught the virus. It works really well at these low levels of infection. Importantly now, for test and trace, it is everyone over the age of 16 that needs to be checked into your premises. Previously, it was just one person from each group that came in. Now, if people don't have the app on their phone, and we find that many don't, you need to ask yourself how you will keep the information. You need to hold it for at least 21 days. And also, think about your procedures for customers and staff who might turn up with coronavirus symptoms. The advice on that is that any person that does turn up with symptoms should be turned away and told to get a PCR test and self-isolate. I've mentioned before that 1 in 3 people don't show any symptoms of the virus, even though they have it. We can now get free rapid test kits for all workers, and we're highly recommending that staff within your establishments are tested regularly, and by that we mean twice a week, so that we can prevent transmission from asymptomatic people. For more information on that, Staffordshire County Council has a link there, but I know it's always difficult to write those sorts of things down. We'll provide that information after the presentation. Also, while not directly related to the virus, if your establishment has been closed for some time, there is a possibility that Legionella could have built up within your water systems. So we're advising you to make sure that you flush through hot and cold water systems with fresh mains water for several minutes regularly before you reopen. Make sure your hot water is set to a minimum of 60 degrees centigrade. And if you need more information on that, the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health has a very, very good guide on lockdown risks and reopening safely in relation to Legionnaire's disease. Again, we'll provide the link later. So looking at specifically the changes for indoor hospitality and other spaces, of course, indoor hospitality resumes. For social contact, the rules are 6 people or 2 households can attend and sit together indoors. So we're suggesting that you ask customers for confirmation of the number of people in their party at the time of booking or on arrival. Customers at different tables must be a minimum of 2 meters apart, and after that with 1 meter of mitigation. We'll give you a bit more information about that in a moment. No groups should be interacting with each other. You're still limited to table service where alcohol is available. So that's for ordering, service and payments. Masks must be worn when not seated at the table, for example, going to the toilet. You don't need to provide a substantial meal. No more discussion about Scotch eggs or anything like that. And there are no restrictions on opening other than your normal licensing and planning restrictions. So if you're about to reopen your indoor space, what we're advising is the following. Establish the capacity of your inside area and how many people you can safely seat inside. You need to bear in mind the social distancing rules, how people enter and leave your premises, any pinch points or narrow areas where people might have to pass each other, how your staff are going to order, serve and take payment. You'll need to ask staff to monitor areas to ensure the different groups are not mixing. We want you to need to provide hand washing facilities and sanitizer for customers outside toilets when they enter the premises and other areas. Ask yourself, can you set up a one-way system with a different entrance and exit? And that's quite important because we've seen situations where you're using a concierge type of arrangement where people walk into the pub and are immediately held while you arrange for someone to take them to a table. But at the same time, you've got people leaving and they're trying to leave through the same door. That causes a pinch point and causes people to have to break down social distancing. So if you can find different entrances and exits, it's worthwhile. Make sure you've got clear signage to direct customers and remind them of the rules. And social distancing will need to be managed in any smoking shelters. Don't allow people to congregate. General advice is don't allow them to take a drink with them or they'll spend too much time there, and probably that's an area where social distancing will break down. For table service, the following social distancing requirements are in place. So for people that are sitting face to face and side to side in different groups, they must be 2 meters apart. That isn't the table, that's the people themselves when they're sat in a normal position. You can reduce that by introducing a barrier between tables, and then it's a maximum of 1 meter, or a minimum of 1 meter. And if people are seated back to back, also a 1 meter separation as a minimum is okay. For a barrier, and there are many examples that we've seen, it needs to be substantial. It needs to be able to prevent aerosol from being spread between tables and between people sitting in different groups. So any gaps will really kind of limit its ability to do that. We're recommending that a minimum of 0.3 meters or a foot above the normal seating position, and also to the side, behind or in front of people, is also in place. That's quite a substantial barrier, so you need to think about that quite carefully. If you can't achieve that, you should be looking at 2 meters for people that are sitting side to side. To give you an example, photograph here, and it's not in the UK. This situation here, the areas I'd pick out, the people that are sitting side by side are less than 1 meter apart. The screens themselves are not substantial and not providing adequate protection between. And for the waitress that's standing there, how is she going to serve people with the barriers there? She's going to have to lean over people and completely break down any social distancing requirements that are in place. My advice to that establishment would have been to remove the middle table completely, and then it might be able to get away with it. So it's attractive to get as many tables in your establishment as space allows, but please remember that the success of step 3 is not seeing infection rates go up. We've seen how quickly this can happen, and it can become uncontrollable. So if they do, it might jeopardize further relaxations in the roadmap. And we're asking you to balance your desire to get as many people in as possible with the possibility of being made to close down again because of another lockdown. Give a bit more space between each group, and then we can have confidence that transmission doesn't happen. Just remember that while we've got variants of that we're aware of at the moment, there's lots of talk about the variants in other parts of the world, and were they to come in or gain a hold in the UK, it could mean that we see big rises in infection rates in the future. The most important thing that's changed in the last few months is our understanding of the importance of ventilation in indoor spaces. So there's new advice out from the Health and Safety Executive that helps us on this, and their main points on what you need to do are as follows. You need to identify any poorly ventilated areas. They're typically going to be places furthest away from windows and doors or any mechanical ventilation. There might be little cubby holes or corners of rooms or something like that. You then need to look to see how you can improve through natural ventilation, and that generally is fairly logical. Open the windows and doors, switch on your ventilation systems. From time to time, it's really a good idea to purge your rooms, air them, so open all the windows fully, doors open, fans on full. Just kind of move the air around, make sure that you've had air exchanges within the rooms themselves. Make sure your staff and the customers understand why you're doing it. Not many people like to sit in a draft or be cold while they're sitting in having a meal. But as long as you can get the balance right, it will really help in making sure that the aerosols that build up from infection or infectious people don't spread. On your mechanical ventilation, make sure you know how it works. Make sure it's been checked out and is working properly. And always operate it for normal occupancy of your building, not reducing it because there's fewer people in. There is a question that we all ask, is how we're going to keep people warm. Hopefully we're going to have a wonderful summer and there's going to be no worries about it. But if you're still operating in this way as cooler conditions are prevalent, you need to work out how we can keep people warm. And that's generally through maybe reducing the openings of windows, providing heating sources themselves. The following advice is expanded on, as I say, by the Health and Safety Executive, and it's on his website. Again, we'll provide links at the end of this session. On the entertainment front, indoors and outdoor events will be possible from step 3. And at the moment, we're expecting further guidance to come out. We hoped it might have been out by now, but unfortunately we haven't seen anything. But there will be further guidance. Don't forget that social distancing rules will remain in place for both indoor and outdoor settings. For indoor events, there will be a capacity for venues in our area of 1,000 people, which we're trying to think of any of our venues which might be able to house 1,000 people in one room, or 50% of normal capacity, whichever is lower. For outdoor events, if they're seated, so large sports stadiums, it's 25% or a maximum of 10,000 people. And for other events where seating isn't provided, there's a maximum occupancy of 4,000 or 50% of normal occupancy. For indoor leisure, organised indoor sports and group classes are allowed to open in step 3. It's really beyond the scope of this webinar to provide specific advice for each type of activity. And the working safely guidance that a lot of you will be aware of will be updated before the next step. Just check the governing bodies websites for different sports for specific advice in that area. And also Sports England, UK Active and SIMSA that deals with indoor gyms and things like that has got some very good advice out there for you to use. Again, remember the importance of social distancing and ventilation. For customers, all your effort, all the efforts that you make, it's still the customer that's key to having a safe environment. Be clear about your rules. I don't like the word rules particularly, but be clear about what you expect their behaviour to be. You can use social media if you want, posters, pictures or any internal TV screens, but give them a really good idea of what customers should expect and what you require of them. We've seen some very good examples in some of our businesses with people being provided with just a simple A4 sheet of what the business is going to do for them and what in return the business hopes that the customer will do for them in return. So please bear that in mind. Using signs is probably one of the best ways of getting the information out simply. So which doors to use or not to use, which way to go, so use of direction arrows and things like that. But make sure you're clear signage. So review your signage now before you reopen to make sure that it works. Ask somebody that isn't involved with the business to come in and see what they think about it. And finally, don't forget, we're still at a situation where we're expecting people to wash their hands, use face coverings and maintain social distancing. Finally, try to reduce the spread of virus is really important at this stage. We're so close to the relaxations we all want to see. If you need any further assistance or clarification on anything relating to COVID, please contact us. That's our email address for any information that you need. Remember to check the guidance that the government produce on their .gov website, particularly the working safely guidance, which will get updated shortly before step 3 commences. We wish it was now, but it isn't. But make sure you keep checking for changes on that. And with that, thank you very much for the time you've taken to watch the presentation, and I'll hand you back to Wayne.
Thanks very much, Graham, for providing such a detailed presentation. And we do hope everyone has found the information useful as you prepare for the 17th of May. We will post today's event on our YouTube channel, so you will be able to watch it back later or share it with your colleagues, and we'll place the link to that on our website too. I'll now hand over to Councillor Edwards to say a few words and close today's session, but we will stay online for a few more minutes just in case you have any further questions. Thanks.
There are a few questions in the chat box. We've got a message from Steph about what about takeaways with indoor tables, and we've also had a message from Jackie that says, do staff still have to wear face masks? So if we could just reply to those messages. I can see Jasmine's replying to those now. Thank you, Jasmine.
Liz, it might be useful if Graham is able to answer those questions as well.
Okay.
I'm happy to do that. Am I on, Liz?
2 seconds.
Okay.
Right, you are now. Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Right, Steph, what about takeaways with indoor tables? For indoor tables, if you don't sell alcohol, someone can come to your counter to order and collect food and drink, but they should then return to the table and it should be consumed at a table seated. Ideally, just one person from each group that to come up to you to do the orders, but that's absolutely fine. If you have a license for alcohol or anything like that, I'm afraid it's table service throughout and you'll need to go to the table to take orders. Jackie, on the question of staff needing to wear face masks, I think that's something that you need to take into account with your risk assessment or your control measures. You need to work that out. There isn't a simple answer for it, but if they're in contact with customers, you really need to be wearing face masks. But if you want more detailed information, come back to us via the email address.
We've got another question from Anonymous Graham, which says, for entertainment, I am assuming this is from the 21st of June. Will the 50% capacity still apply?
So for entertainment, we're still waiting specific guidance on that sector, but entertainment outdoors can take place. If you want to contact us via the email address, we can look at your specific situation, but the advice that we gave was from May the 17th, entertainment can start to take place.
We've had a question from Richard Bauer. He says, we haven't released any tickets for our open farm past the 17th of May. Until we know 100% this will happen, are we right to do this?
It's a decision it's a business decision, Richard, on that one. We're expecting those sorts of premises to be able to open from the 17th of May. We can't see anything that's stopping step 3 taking place from that time at the moment. All of the indicators that the government have set are in place. But I think if you want to be absolutely certain, wait until you see what the government's announcement is next week.
And then we've got another question from Jackie, which asks, what are the procedures if a member of staff becomes positive?
They should not come to the premise, to the business. They need to be sent home, get a PCR test and self-isolate until such time as they know the result of that test.
I think that's all the questions for now. There is a bit of a delay, so if we just give it a couple of minutes just to see if any filter through before we wrap up.
In the meantime, if I pass back to Wayne, Elizabeth.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, Wayne, do you want me to wind up now?
Yes, that's great. Thank you, Graham. Yes, I'll hand over to Councillor Edwards now. Thank you, Councillor.
Well, morning, everyone. I hope you found that useful. I certainly have. It never does any harm to remind you of all the rules that you're supposed to be working to in this very difficult time. And let's hope that when June comes, we won't have to look at these things. But I hope you found this morning very useful, and I believe we are staying online for a few more minutes just to allow further questions if needed. So thanks very much for attending, everyone, and I wish you well in your reopening. Thanks very much.
Still got 5 attendees online. Oh, we've had another question. So it says, we have a license, hence table service, but if customers wish to buy a balls, is this still table service? We are a tennis club with license. Can customers come to bar, for example, a tin of balls?
If I come back on that, Liz, I think if it really seems quite normal to allow someone to go and get a tin of balls at a tennis club if they're going straight back out rather than having to be served from a table. I think there's a practicality to it, but if you want to contact us separately, we can chat to you about it.
There's another question, Graham, that we've got, which is from Jackie. If a member of staff tests positive, does the premises require a deep clean?
I'd strongly advise, if they've got a workstation or anything like that, that you make sure you've cleaned that area down. You should be cleaning regularly anyway, and that should control any transfer or transmission of the infection via surfaces anyway.
No more questions in at the minute. The attendees have dropped down to 3 now, so I think if anybody else has got any more questions, if they can send them to the email address, then that we'll come back to them there, I think. Okay. Thank you very much.